Good evening and welcome to tonight's episode of TDOC Talks. We're here at the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex in Pikeville, Tennessee. BCCX is the diagnostic facility for all male offenders coming into TDOC's custody. The diagnostic process is very in-depth and not many people know exactly what it entails, so tonight that's what we're going to talk about. This door right here is the exact same door that every single male offender that comes into the custody of the Tennessee Department of Correction goes through when they begin the intake process here at the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. Joining me is Clerical Correctional Officer Lena Bledsoe of BCCX, and she works for the intake here. Officer Bledsoe, what can you tell us about the intake process? What can offenders who come through that door, what can they expect next? Okay,
they're going to line up on this wall with their facing the wall, and they're going to get unshackled and uncuffed, and then they're going to come in front of the cell sense tower and they're going to do a complete 360 to see if that light turns red. If that light turns red, it's obviously picking up some metal, whether it be in a cell phone, shank, things along that line.
That's incredible, and that's very accurate, very sensitive when it comes to detecting those things, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Can I give it a try?
Yes.
Here we go, let's see how this works. So, as you can see, I didn't even get the full 360. It already picked up my watch, probably my belt, and it also definitely picked up my cell phone. That's incredibly sensitive.
Correct.
And that's phenomenal because that is the first line of defense for when it comes to preventing contraband from making its way into this secure facility. And that's important in all of our facilities, but especially here at the intake process. And as incredible as that is, that's just the first step in many layers of contraband detection that offenders go through when they begin the intake process. And if you'll join Officer Bledsoe and I, we'll show you the rest. So that was just the first step. Here is the next step in the line of defense against contraband. What are we looking at?
This right here is our boss chair. When the inmate comes in, they sit down in this chair and it senses if they have metal throughout their body. And on the back, it will show us the area where it's going to pick up the metal at. And then when they get done, if it hasn't picked up anything, they'll come around to the back and they'll put their chin on there and go from side to side, and if everything clears, then they're good to go the next step.
So this is a full body detection system,
yes,
very similar to the cell sense tower in that it detects any type of metal material that could be a weapon or maybe a cell phone, correct?
Yes.
That's phenomenal because as you can see, that's two steps that the offenders have to go through immediately upon entering that we have in place to ensure that they are not bringing in any type of contraband, especially the likes of a weapon or a cell phone that could prove to be very, very dangerous in this setting. So after they've gone through the cell sense and the boss chair and we've determined there's no metal, no type of weapon or cell phone on them, what happens after that?
After that, they'll go through some more steps, which is they'll go back here to this area and they're strip searched and they're drug tested, and then from there they're issued their blue uniform.
And is that all the intake process, or is there more to it?
No, there's more steps to it.
So we're finished in here,
yes,
in this room, but the intake process continues?
Yes.
So would you show us?
Yes.
Okay, so here we are in another large room, very similar to the one you just showed us. How is this one different? What happens here?
Okay, in this room, the inmates are going to come and they're going to get into the cells, and from there they're going to pull and talk to medical, they're going to talk to counselors, and they're going to get fingerprinted.
And talking to the counselors and the medical, what exactly does that entail? Is that like really in-depth medical history, or just kind of?
Yes, and they're going to go over their medications that they're on and things like that. And then when they talk to the counselors, they're going to go over their charges, PREA, things like that.
But that's not necessarily the diagnostic part yet.
Correct.
We haven't got to that.
Right. This is still intake.
So that's what the offenders go through. That's kind of what their process is like. What about you specifically? What exactly is your primary duty in this whole process?
Okay. When the inmates first get here, I look at all the paperwork that comes in from the county jail, all their judgment orders, revocations, warrants, and I have to ensure that everything is correct on there and make sure that the judge's signature, things along that line are there, because potentially we've had inmates come in that were possibly on probation and not actually a TDOC sentence, so those inmates had to go back to the county jail.
And obviously that's very important because we want to make sure that we have the right offender in the right bed. So that seems really important, and it seems like that's actually probably one of the most important parts of this process. Where does that step fall in the whole intake process? Okay,
because once that step's done, and then all the paperwork will go to the counselors, and then the counselors can go through their process, and the officers will have the judgment orders and revocation order in front of them to put the information in for the fingerprint machine. So I'm actually step 1.
So you are technically the very first step in the entire intake process.
Yes.
And that's just the intake. As we just mentioned a second ago, there is actually a completely separate part known as diagnostic.
Yes.
So how about we go and talk about diagnostics and see how that plays into the intake process. So after an offender has arrived here at Bledsoe and they've gone through intake, they come here to this room called the orientation room. And once they get here, they're going to meet with diagnostics Corporal Stephen Brown. Corporal Brown, how are you, sir?
Doing good.
Thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about what an offender, once they come to you here to the orientation room, what can they expect? What are they going to be learning here? What are they going to be going through?
Okay. Basically what happens here, after they're done with the intake, they're going to come in, we're going to give them the rules, regulations of the facility. They're going to have their rules of the pod. Each pod has a different rule of what they need to do, how to set up their attire, how to set up their unit, their pod. Once that's done, then what they're going to do is we'll go over the ONET. That ONET will determine whether or not there's certain jobs that interest that inmate. What can help them as they get back on the street to help them provide for their families. Once that's completed, we'll also go into a checklist of what needs do they have once they're going back out on the street. Do they need help with their birth certificate? Need help with housing, clothing, transportation, those modes. Once those are determined what those needs are, we'll finish that up. Past that, we'll go on to the steps of how to set up their beds, their sleeping areas, their quarters they're going to be staying in while they're here at this facility.
And you have an example of the bed right here behind us, but before we get to that, one of the reasons we go over those rules and regulations and why that's so important is because we don't know where they're coming from. We just know they've been at a local facility, and we want to make sure that when they are under TDOC's supervision, when they're in our custody, that they know exactly what is expected of them.
Correct.
They know no matter where they are within the state at a TDO facility, this is how they are to act, this is what is expected of them, correct?
Correct. Basically, we're going to teach them that each facility that under TDOC does the same exact thing, each one of us. How to make your bed, how to set up your day, the daily routine of what you're going to go through, all of those things are the same thing as you go across the state of Tennessee.
So, and you have an example right here of what their bed and their cells will look like.
Correct. Each bed, when we first start off, we're going to show them, our inmates, that we want a tight, neat bed made. And it's going to be done every single day. Because Monday through Friday, our inspection is going to be at 9 a.m. So when they leave that unit, they have to be inspection ready, whether they're in that unit or not. We'll tell them how to place their clothes in their cubbies, you know, with their one fold to the outside, whites, blues together. We're also going to tell them where they're going to be putting their commissary, where their hygiene goes, and show them. Once we do this through them, and we teach them how to make their bed, how to place their folds, how to get everything tight and neat, then we're going to take and we're going to show them how to set up their cubby. They're going to have a visual aid that they're going to work with inside their unit as well. It's all going to be on their shelf.
That's incredible because, as you can see, this is exactly what an offender is learning when they come into TDOC custody. And as many of you know, if you watch TDOC Talks and you've seen Commissioner Parker on many of our episodes, this is something he really stresses because this type of structure, as you said, the rules, the regulations, the responsibility that goes into this is so important because, as I just said, that's teaching them responsibility in a structured environment as well as accountability when they fail to comply with these small rules in place.
Correct.
And that's that's so important to their rehabilitation and ensuring that they are working on becoming productive. And eventually, when they do go home, they are productive citizens.
Absolutely.
And so, is that all for day one? We've gone through a lot, and we're still in day one, correct?
Yeah, we're still in day one. Once we get done with this, they're actually going to go over to another unit, which is the H building, and they're going to go through there, and it's going to go over where their unit's going to be, where they're going to be housed at, whether it's going to be A bed or B bed, depending on their medical history. Also, then they're going to teach them or give them the rules and regulations from there as a unit management will do. The unit managers may need to go over a few things that's been changed in policy or whatever. They'll do that with them at that time.
Okay, so how long is the diagnostic process?
The diagnostic process starts on day one, and it'll go through up to 14 days. You'll have a day two that'll consist of, the day two is going to consist of your medical or mental health assessment, STG coordinator, they're going to see them. You're going to do blood, urine samples at that time with the lab, and then they're going to see the chaplain also that gives them their religious and their paper and their envelopes that they're going to need to get with their families. Then on day four, we're going to come back and they're going to go through dental, physical, and mental health follow-up if need be. Then you're going to go to day 7, which is going to be a TABE test. And that's going to be testing them on their Tennessee Adult Basic Education. If they've not received a diploma, then we'll get them to where we can assess whether they need to have a diploma, give them the steps to get that. Then day 12, usually on that one, it consists of strong arm and reclass is what they're going to do there. Once that's done, day 14 usually brings us into classification. At that point, we're going to classify them where there's going to be a member of security, counseling, and medical staff. And at that point, we'll have them classified and their process will be completed, and they'll go on to overflow until they are determined where they're going to go and house for their time building facility.
And that's the next important step, is getting that classification, which will then determine what facility to go to, whether it's a time building facility, a program facility, etc. And yes, of course, that's when you come into their case management plan, the rehabilitative programming, etc. So that's a long process, and there's a lot that goes into it. But that last day is just as important as the 13 days prior to it, correct?
Yes, it is.
Awesome.
Yes.
Again, that's a lot. You guys do so much here, and it's so in-depth. And again, just the rules, the regulations, ensuring they understand the structure and know how to abide by it. So I'm so incredibly thankful for all the hard work you guys do, because obviously it's a huge task. And I think the next thing we need to do is go ahead and take a look at that last step, the day 14 classification.
Sounds good.
Okay, so as you guys have seen, the intake and diagnostic process is a 2-week process that is very, very in-depth. And on that 14th day, they come here to this room where they meet with Correctional Counselor Kim White, or this gentleman, Program Manager Brian Roberts. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. So what can offenders expect? They're on day 14. They've gotten to this point in the intake and diagnostic process. What happens here?
We will have them called over, and the group will go into the holding cell, and then they will have their classification hearing, where we will discuss their custody assessment points. We'll tell them what their custody is. We give them an opportunity to ask us any questions, usually about placement programs, if they have any doubts as to why they've been scored, what they're scored, and then we wrap it up, and that group will be done, and they will be ready to ship out whenever Central Transport's ready for them.
Okay. And that classification hearing that you were just talking about happens in this room right behind us.
Yes, the room right behind us.
Every classification hearing that every offender goes through happens in this room.
Yes.
And who all is involved in that hearing?
We will have 4 members on the classification board. Most times I'm chair. If not me, it will be Correctional Counselor 3, Kim White. She is usually the treatment member. We will have a security member, which is a corporal or above, and then we have a clinical services member.
Okay. And when they get classified, tell us a little bit more about what that is. I know they have different designations.
Right. We will determine whether they are medium, minimum, minimum restrict, minimum direct, or on some occasions close custody, usually due to assaultive behavior, whether here or in the county jail.
That's going to determine what facility they go to. And as we know, not all TDOC facilities are the same as far as how they supervise their offenders. Some are time building, some are program. Can you tell us a little bit about those different facilities and how that classification works?
The time building are for those with over 10 years till their expiration date. Programming is under 10 years. And that does play a big role in where they get shipped and what they can expect once they get to their permanent institution as to what programming that will be available to them. The mediums will be on the general compound. Any that qualify for a special program like the SAIU, also known as boot camp, they'll be minimum direct, and they will be going to the Attorney Center Wayne County Annex for that program.
So, and again, that's really, really important because it's so important that we have the right offender in the right bed at the right time, making sure they're getting the programming they need when they need it, and only that programming, that they're not having to sit in classes or programs that necessarily isn't going to benefit them. So that's incredibly important, but that all doesn't happen on that day. That's the result. So what exactly are you doing to ensure that classification process is efficient and effective as possible? What are you doing days 1 through 12 and 13 before they get here?
Prior to the classification hearing, once the strong R is complete, we are notified that everything is complete as far as strong R, and we will get this offender's file for a final review. We're checking to see if they have anything that, especially out-of-state stuff, that may not be on Thomas, to make sure that their custody assessment points are accurate so that their custody is appropriate, and anything that may knock them out of participation or eligibility for programs like boot camp or for the technical violators program if they are mandated by the revocation board. We do that. That's our final records check before we get the list ready and send that out as to who we're going to classify the next day.
That's awesome. You have a very important job, Mr. Roberts, and I really want to thank you not only for your time here, kind of walking us through it so we get a better idea, but just thank you for the job you do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So as you guys can see, the intake and diagnostic process is a lot more in-depth than just bringing them in here and then sending them on their way, the offenders that is, to a facility based simply on this program or that program. It is a very in-depth process that involves a focus on safety and security, ensuring that when they come in here, they do not have any type of contraband such as weapons or cell phones or drugs, because we want them to come in here to a safe environment, making sure that they aren't bringing in any danger, and of course making sure that they themselves aren't in any danger. And then of course there's also the diagnostic side, ensuring that they understand the rules, the regulations, and the procedures, so they get that structure that helps teach them responsibility and accountability, so that when they go home, because as we know 95% of our offenders will be going home, when they go home they have, again, that structured responsibility and accountability that's going to help them to become productive citizens. And of course also the classification process that ensures that they are going through the appropriate and proper rehabilitative programming. We want to make sure that we are not wasting finite resources providing them with programs that aren't necessarily going to benefit them. So again, that's a lot of information, but that's because it's a huge deal, and there's so much that goes into the mission here, specifically at Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. The staff here are phenomenal. They have a huge mission, a huge task ahead of them that involves a lot of responsibility, but they do so well in carrying out that mission and serving the state and carrying out that mission, and they're so good at it that, in fact, we just found out recently that they received a 99.69% on their most recent audit. That's incredible. It's unheard of because it's such a phenomenally high score, and we're super proud of them. So kudos to them. We thank them for all their hard work. We really greatly appreciate them and all the efforts they're doing here at Bledsoe. We thank you guys for watching. We really, really appreciate it. Remember, you can catch us here the first and third Thursday of every month. So again, thank you for watching. As always, find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, you can find any information you need about TDOC on our website, tn.gov/correction.